Welcome back. I'm James. You're watching Blue Dog Aquatics. Now, I did just upload a video, although somehow it's a weird thing. I'm still figuring out with live streaming is that, I don't know, it turned it, and so like when you're watching the screen, you're like, what's he doing? So, yeah, hopefully this one works out a little bit better, which means that I have to restream all 20 minutes of it. It's all right. I think this time, now that we have a feel of what we did, we can stream it a lot better. So, what we're talking about today, and if you didn't catch the live on the last one, I apologize for not doing a video lately. I've been moving from... I sold my house, and anybody that's moved more than once knows that that's such a pain. And I swear, like, I go through closets, and I'm like, what on earth is in there? Like, I haven't been in there in so many years. And then I'm like, what do I do with all that? And then you take so much stuff to the dump. It's just crazy. But today what we're talking about are the 10 things that you need to know when getting a snake. And number one, as always, is research. Research. And I can't emphasize that enough. You can talk to any of my clientele that come in here anytime someone says, well, I'm interested in this animal. Okay, go home and do some research. Because research is so crucial, because there is so much bad information out there that you want to ensure that you are providing that animal the best quality of life and the best, essentially that's what it comes down to, is so that animal can live its best life and so that you can enjoy it. So that's number one. Number two is picking out picking out the perfect ball python for you. And yeah, we're talking about ball pythons today because I get these questions so often with ball pythons. We could do videos, and we can do videos on boas or other different variations, corn snakes, king snakes of snakes. So, but this one today, we're focusing on ball pythons. Now, there are so many gorgeous, beautiful ball pythons, and we get them on a regular basis, but picking out the perfect one. I mean, I have some people come in, like we had someone come in on Sunday. We had a Super Russo Blue-Eyed Lucy, and they literally walked in and said, yep, that's the one. I felt that in my heart. Yep, that's the one. Okay. All right, perfect. Feel that connection. And that is honestly the best feeling, is when you connect with a snake and you're like, yep, that's going to be my buddy for the next several years, because ball pythons do live for a while. But number three, I know that was like kind of hard to see. I was like, three. Number three is, once you figure out what ball python you want, then you need to find a vendor or wholesaler or retailer or what have you that has said snake. I know we can pull them up online, and sometimes you see one online and it's just like, yep, that's the one. But then where do I find it? Well, you come to Blue Dog Aquatics, of course, and we'll find it for you. Honestly, that happens more times than not, where we have someone come in, but when we do that, we're like, okay, you got to put half up front, because if you decide to change your mind, well, then I'm stuck with a snake that I may or may not want, and then I got to resell it. So yeah, make sure to go to a reputable breeder or a retailer that knows what they're doing. Be careful with some of the box stores, because they don't always quarantine them, and then we'll get into that here in a little bit. But so once you find a store that has your snake, we'll dip into number 4, which is going home and setting up the perfect environment for that animal. Now, the enclosure is going to determine on what size snake. Now, do you want to do a juvenile or do you want to do an adult? Which size is going to be better suited for you? Now, adults are a lot more forgiving. They're a lot more tolerant, and yeah, overall, they're, in my opinion, they're better. Babies can occasionally be nippy, and that's not just, I mean, that's not because they're like trying to get out and hurt you. It's just because they're scared. I mean, everything to them is a predator. And so, if you are a knowledgeable person who's done your research, I mean, either one is a suitable fit, but it depends on what size enclosure we'll need. For example, let me turn this camera around. Premium snake kit. This is a 20-gallon long. This would be suited for a juvenile ball python. Versus when you get into the adults, this is, look at this dimension. 36 by 18 by 18. That would be an enclosure for an adult. I always tell people that if the snake can go from the side, so up the side and all the way across the back and touch, that enclosure is too small for them. Next up, what you need is, okay, so first off, we do the enclosure. Well, then you need a hide. And whether it's a wood hide like this or a plastic hide, or if it's something that you just design out of cork, you know, that's your choice, depending on what you want to do. Another key factor is you need a heat pad. And this is so that the snake can stay warm. And I always tell people with these to buy the regulators, so that, and you plug this into the regulator, and hold on, I will show you what I'm talking about. Oh, I know, it's going crazy. I don't have my big camera. This right here is a regulator, and that is something that you need. You can adjust what kind of heat is put out, and then you can plug it in, and it's overall safe, and that is what I always recommend anytime people buy a heat pad. Next up is the water dish, because obviously the snake needs to drink. So I always tell people that you need a water dish that is big enough that the snake can fit its entire body in. Now, and that varies, because like this is Iris, this is one of our boas, but she has a big water dish. This is another one of our boas, but he also has a big water dish. You can kind of see he's going through shed right now. This is what's called, you see his eyes? That's called blue. And it's just a terminology that we use for when they're going into shed. But we can do a whole another video on that another time. But I was going to see if one of the big ball pythons was out, but he's in his hide. And the reason why they have their hides is, like, you can have this huge enclosure and this small hide, and they will jam their entire body in that hide to feel safe. Now, on to number 5. Bedding. Bedding is very crucial. I guess, well, bedding ties more into number 4. But depending on what type of bedding you want, depends on the environment. A lot of people are going bioactive nowadays versus just doing your standard mulch, or, well, not mulch, because mulch you got to be very careful with, because some of it's dyed, and that can be very harmful to your animal. What I meant is, I meant like jungle mix or Reptibark, the bark blends, that type of stuff is what I meant by mulch. But so it really depends on what type of environment you want and what kind of setup you want. Now, lighting just really, the snake doesn't care. Most ball pythons live their life in bins or drawers because people use them for breeders and this and that. Lighting is your personal preference. That snake doesn't care either way. I mean, you're gonna have natural light from the room and all that comes in. So, but yeah, it's just insanity. But so we got the enclosure built. Now we're on to number 5. I know we kind of like lagged back there for a minute, but on to number 5. Number 5 and the halfway mark is, where do ball pythons get their names from? I know, but do you know? If you do, make sure to drop a comment. And while you're doing that, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button to stay tuned. Our channel is growing so much, but I want to get it up to that 5,000 subscriber mark, and you guys can have it. Now you guys remember our green tree python here, Maleficent. Let's see where she's at. Oh, she's down here. Last video we did, she actually got out and she made her way all the way over there on the top. And I posted that video on TikTok and it went viral. Last time I checked it had something like 55,000 views. I have never had 55,000 views ever. And so that is absolutely incredible. And I would want that to transfer over here so that we can bring more content and more reliable info to all of you. So back to what we were talking about. Number 5. Do you know what number 5 is? What could it be? Going and picking up your snake. So after you get the enclosure set up, after you get everything squared away, then you are on your way home. Now, number 5 is quarantine. And we talked a little bit about this a little bit ago, and that's because quarantine is very important. Every animal that we have come through our store here goes through quarantine, at least a week. If they come in rough shape, which we hope they don't, then they stay in longer. Quarantine is very important and make sure to stay captive bred. Wild caught, anytime we pull animals from the wild, we're depleting the number count of animals in the wild, and we don't want to do that. So always try to buy captive bred. I know there are certain animals that you can only find through the wild, but guess what? If you can only find them in the wild, there's probably a reason why they're not in captivity. But quarantine. And also make sure to buy from a reputable breeder, wholesaler, vendor, retailer. Make sure that they are well known and they're well versed, because you don't want to get a snake, take it home, and it go downhill. I mean, that's absolutely what we don't want. So when you take the snake and take it home, if you have a lot of snakes, then put it in its own area. That way it's away from your other snakes, because let's say it has mites or parasites or anything like that, we don't want that transferring to a whole rack system of snakes. Trust me, been there, done that, had a snake come in from a customer. That's actually why we don't allow snakes or any kind of outside animal in here anymore, and that's we don't want that outside mite or parasite or whatever coming in the store. And yes, it's rare, but I'll tell you what, you can talk to any snake person that's ever dealt with mites, and it is a royal pain. We actually treat our adult snakes with ivermectin, obviously a diluted form. And if you want to see a video on how to create that diluted form, make sure to drop a comment and let me know, because I would be happy to. Now, we don't treat... We have two different forms. We have a different treatment that we use for juvenile snakes, and then for our older snakes over 1,200 grams, we use ivermectin mixture. And we'll actually... I'm so paranoid about getting mites. Like, I hate dealing with mites. And so, like, we'll actually mix ivermectin into our mop water, into the floor, just to get it everywhere. Like, I can't stand mites. But let's say that you take your first snake home and it's your only snake. Okay, well, it's quarantining because it's in its own enclosure. There's no other snakes, no other animals. But even with that, when you bring it home, that animal's going to be stressed. It came from whatever vendor to the box store or reptile store that sold it, then to your house. So that animal's under a lot of stress, and so leave that ball python alone for a week. Our juveniles eat once a week. Our adults eat once every 2 weeks. So it is not a big deal for you to leave it alone for a week. That way it can scout out its new enclosure. And I know we want to bring them home. We want to play with them. We want to show them off to Ma, Pa, Grandpa, everybody. But it is in the best interest and safety of that animal to just leave it alone for a week. That way it can get more situated. It can feel comfortable. And I mean, trust me, it's going to come out. It's going to explore. It's going to do its thing. And that's what's important. Now, we're at number 5. So that leads us to number 6. Now, number 6 is after your quarantine is through. Anytime, and number 6 is actually handling. So, couple rules of thumb when thinking about when you're handling ball pythons is A, always wash your hands before and after. Hand sanitizer, I mean, make sure that you wash. And that's both for the safety of the animal as well as for you. Number 2, don't ever smell like rodents, because that's where, ball pythons, I can honestly say, I've been bit by one once in like 10 years, and it was an accidental bite because I smelled like a rodent, and I think it accidentally struck past the rodent and caught my hand. It doesn't happen a whole lot. But to prevent that, we wash our hands. We make sure not to touch the rodents. When we're handling, we make sure to, which we're going to jump in right now, is number 7. Number 7 is feeding. Feeding is very important. There's a couple of different ways to do it. And now in a store setting like what we have here, and if you haven't seen our store, I mean, we have vision cages, we got PVC enclosures, we have a lot of snakes. At any one point in time, I have, 30 different snakes. What I tell people is that when you feed your ball python, take it out of its enclosure, put it in a little heated tote, leave it there for a little bit, then get your rodent and feed it in the tote. That way they don't associate their enclosure with feeding. Now, in a store setting, it's very hard to do that and very, very time consuming. Would I love to do that? Absolutely. But we can't. We want to make sure that everybody gets fed, everybody's taken care of. And so, yeah, we have to feed in enclosures, but it's very easy to adapt. Now, number 8 is when we're feeding, do we feed frozen? Do we feed live? There's a lot of controversy going back and forth on which to feed. And honestly, we feed frozen. Every snake in here eats frozen. One, I don't have to deal with the smell of live rodents. I'm not saying there's nothing against them eating live rodents. I'm not saying that. They do it out in the wild. And yeah, it's not a huge thing. With us, we have a freezer. Actually, we have 2 freezers full of rodents, and it's easier because I can bring them out. I can thaw the rodent out. I can heat the rodent up and then feed it. And then if they don't eat that frozen rodent, I can put it in a Ziploc bag. I can throw it in the fridge, or I can feed it to one of my monitors or tegus. I mean, they're just walking garbage disposals. Now, with live, the things you have to be careful with live feeding is you have to watch. You have to watch to make sure that snake kills, because if that snake's not interested or not hungry, and trust me, it happens. Ball pythons are notorious for going on kicks where they just won't eat. And I mean, our Maleficent, our green tree python, I mean, she goes on 8-month kicks. Yeah, 8 months where she just won't eat, and she just, no, not gonna do it. And then she comes out of that 8-month spike, and she will pound for rodents for several months, and then she goes on another kick. And I mean, it happens. Ball pythons are notorious for it as well. They go on kicks where they just won't eat. The biggest thing with live feeding is making sure that that rat, mouse, whatever, quail, bird, chicken, I mean, depending on when you're getting into, like, well, I guess that's Burmese, retics and all that. But making sure that that rodent doesn't harm that snake. And trust me, I've seen it. We had a Margaret, I don't know if you've seen our Aquatics video, but we had a big 8-foot coastal carpet python. She came from a home that you could tell was fed live. And I'm saying you could tell because she had bite marks and claw marks all up and down her back, all kinds of scarring, and that is not fair to the animal. They can't run away from that rodent, and so that rodent is going to do extreme damage to them. Now, number 9. Number 9 is anytime you get a new animal, especially ball pythons, take them to your vet. Now I am going to give a huge shout out to our vet who helps us take care of all of our animals, and that is Dr. Merkwan. Dr. Merkwan, and I'm just going to show you the card here, so if you want to take a picture of it, you want to freeze the video right now, that is his information. He is the guy that we bring in if we're having issues, or if we have an animal that comes in that's sick. He helps us out. He's an amazing, great guy, and he's very, very knowledgeable. So I recommend when people have ball pythons or really any kind of reptile to do semi-annual visits with their vet, so about twice a year, just to make sure that your animal's growing the way it should, to make sure that there's no health issues or underlying issues. So yeah, just make sure to check out your vet. And last but not least is number 10. But before we get into number 10, I think you should see some cool things. All right. So you know how I'm like big into chameleons. Well, we just got a new chameleon. This is a forest chameleon. Look at him. He's like, you can't see me. I'm a branch. Now you can see the enclosure here, lots and lots of coverage. And you're like, well, how do you have them in that little enclosure and not in a screen enclosure? Well, he's not a chameleon like our panthers and our veils and our Jacksons. Completely different type of chameleon. And they're like, well, you say you do research, but we never see you do it. Of course not, because I'm helping you guys out, and yeah, I'm not gonna let you sit here and I'm not gonna stare at a screen while you guys are out here going, help please, I need something. No, obviously I'm gonna come out, I'm gonna help you guys. I mean, trust me. I'll sit in here and do my research when I don't have customers, or if I'm not feeding or watering or one of the other 9 million things I do. And then when I go home and put my kids to bed, then I'll stay up and I'll do even more research on different variations of animals. Now, I did want to give you a sneak peek before we got into number 10 of some of our animals. This is an ivory male. Look at how cute he is. He's a ball python. And you're like, well, why is he in here and not out there? That is because this is our quarantine room. And you're like, well, are they sick? Should you be messing with them? We've actually had these guys for longer than a week. They're only in here because we don't have space for them out there. Look at that. That is actually a baby snow corn snake. And he's a little sassy, but that's all right. Oh, I'm going to sit down. All right, if you remember what the thumbnail was, that's of this boy right here. This is a super pastel firefly vanilla ball python. He's about 20 months old. Absolutely stunning. Make sure to lock that because we've actually had snakes that just push the drawers open. This one right here is a cinnamon albino. And he crapped all over his... I just cleaned this, dude. Like, really? Look at that color pattern. And last but not least, this isn't a ball python, but this is... I just thought it was cool. This is a wolf snake. Look at that pattern. But alright, guys. Last but not least, number 10. And that is, congratulations, you own a ball python. If you followed all these steps, you will have a very happy and long life with your new ball python. I'm so incredibly happy that you chose Blue Dog Aquatics to do your research with. And if you have any more questions on that, feel free to drop us a comment or shoot us a message on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. We are always here for you, always for the animals. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm James, and always the big question, your tank or mine? Tune in next week.